The Olympics, although supposedly apolitical, are frequently controversial. The 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics in China is beginning to look like one of the most contentious in recent memory, with many drawing comparisons to some of the worst Olympics in history. With tensions rising between Western countries and China, especially the United States and Canada, calls to boycott or relocate the Games are growing in number and strength, especially as the Chinese regime's numerous human rights abuses continue to come to light. The act of boycotting the Olympic Games for political reasons is nothing new. In the history of the modern Olympic Games, there have been 7 major boycotts, some of them including over 30 countries. The reasons for these boycotts vary from year to year, but they largely depend on the host country, and always happen for political reasons. The first of these boycotts was in 1936, when the Summer Olympics were held in Berlin, only 3 years before the beginning of World War II, when Germany was completely under Nazi control. However, the only countries to boycott the Olympics, held by a fascist regime hell-bent on eugenics and ethnic cleansing, were the USSR and Spain. But the reason Spain didn't participate was because of its ongoing civil war. The lack of boycotts for the 1936 Olympics has long since been a source of shame for many Western countries, who were later seen as knowingly ignoring the egregious human rights abuses which were ongoing at the time, and participating in an event designed by Hitler to showcase German ethnic superiority. For burgeoning or would-be superpowers, hosting the Olympic Games provides a platform to reveal their wealth, athletic dominance, and power. Governments often use the Games as evidence of their country's prosperity under the current regime. This was the case in the Berlin 1936 Olympics, the Sochi 2014 Olympics, and definitely the 2008 Beijing Summer Olympics, where the Chinese government spent over $40 billion. Advocates for boycotting these Winter Games have started to draw startling comparisons between the 2022 Games and those held in 1936 in Berlin. Xi Jinping's power grab in early 2018, where he became the head of all 3 branches of Chinese government and eliminated term limits for himself, made China an overt dictatorship. The regime's treatment of an ethnic minority, the Uyghurs of the Xinjiang region, has continually gotten worse, beginning with the denial of due legal process and fair trials and failure to hold genuinely open trials as mandated by law for suspects arrested following the ethnic violence in the 2009 riots. The horrendous treatment of these people has been a gradual process that, in 2014, evolved to include secretive re-education camps where over 1 million Uyghur Muslims are being held against their will and without any legal process. Worst yet, description of these camps include reports of horrendous practices such as forced labor verging on slavery, torture, brainwashing, forced contraception, and sterilization in order to intentionally reduce the population. From 2015 to 2018, birth rates in mostly Uyghur regions of Hotan and Kashgar plunged by more than 60%. Many commentators, non-governmental organizations, and even some countries have declared this to be an outright genocide, and urged people to start calling these re-education compounds what they appear to be: modern concentration camps. Those who advocate for a boycott of these games would state that if a boycott of Olympic Games is meant to represent political disapproval of the host country, as it has in the past, then attending the games shows approval, or at the very least, complacency. Many countries' Olympic organizations are understandably fighting against a potential boycott. Their athletes have been training likely their entire lives for this moment. Denying athletes the ability to play could be devastatingly soul-crushing, and would be unlikely to elicit a real change from the Chinese government. In response, many who favor a boycott have tried to make the case for relocating the Games, so that the athletes can still participate, but so that the Chinese regime is still snubbed on the world stage. Currently, the Chinese government has spent a comparatively tiny amount of money and time on these games, about $3.9 billion. less than 10% of the cost of the Summer Olympics in 2008. The problem with this idea is that very few countries have the funds or the desire to host the games, and hosting the games requires both. Finding a suitable replacement in time becomes harder by the day, especially when you account for all the construction that needs to take place. Regardless of the method, many feel that the importance of sending a message to the Chinese regime remains the same. And these aren't the only reasons for a boycott. Don't forget that 2 Canadian citizens have been wrongfully imprisoned in China for over 2 years as a bargaining tactic. 13 Canadian members of Parliament from every political party have even authored a letter urging the Liberal government to act so that the Chinese regime is not allowed another opportunity for positive press coverage and legitimacy while engaging in ongoing, largely successful genocides intended to eliminate an ethnic minority. However, the tragically ironic element to all of this is that the most successful boycott of any Olympic Games for human rights reasons was the boycott of the 1978 Winter Games in Montreal, Canada, by 34 countries, the second largest in Olympic history. The success of this boycott, which was a protest against allowing countries which had toured South Africa during apartheid to compete, was in large part due to the number of countries involved. But in 2022, Canada would have no such support, even from Muslim-majority countries like Saudi Arabia and Iran. Even the United States would be an unlikely partner to partake in the boycott. Many American companies, like Nike and Puma, have profited from the cheap labor provided by the Uyghur camps. With a lack of support, this could result in people seeing this protest as a reaction to the foreign policy differences Canada and China have been having recently, and paint an unnecessary target on Canada's back for no real material benefit. Whether you believe that the boycotting of the Olympics is an inadequate method to express disapproval of a regime's behavior, or think that this should be a part of a greater reaction on the part of Western countries, we should all agree that something must be done to deter or punish the Chinese government for wrongfully detaining foreign citizens and carefully planning a genocide of its citizens, in the same way that we should condemn any country involved in any form of human rights violations.